In the spring of 2012, on Earth 616, humanity still believed it was alone in the universe. 70 years of secret wars had come and gone, wars of spies, serums, and men in flying armor. And through all of it, every weapon the Earth had ever built was pointed at other humans. Nobody was watching the sky. But Nick Fury was. He had known the truth since 1995, since a war between two alien empires spilled onto Earth and he watched Carol Danvers fly away into the stars. So when a god fell out of the sky over New Mexico 15 years later, it taught Fury nothing new. It only confirmed what he had been quietly preparing for ever since. The universe knew where Earth was, and sooner or later, it would come back. So S.H.I.E.L.D. turned to the most powerful object in its vaults. The Tesseract had traveled a long road to get there. It had powered Hydra's war machine, been pulled from the ocean floor by Howard Stark, been stolen into orbit by a Kree scientist hiding among humans. In 1995, it had found its way back, coughed up onto Nick Fury's desk by a creature that only looked like a cat. Since that day, S.H.I.E.L.D. had kept it locked away. Now, Fury handed it to a team of scientists with a new mission. Unlock it. Turn its endless energy into power, into defense, into weapons. They called the program Phase 2, and they believed they were preparing Earth for the next war. They had no idea that by waking the cube's power, they had already been noticed by something out in the dark. What had noticed them did not wait long. Deep inside the research facility, the Tesseract began to glow, with no hand upon it and no machine behind it. The cube was feeling what the scientists could not. Something was coming. Far beyond the solar system, the Mind Stone, sister to the Space Stone sleeping inside that cube, was traveling toward Earth, sealed in a golden scepter, carried in the hands of a fallen prince. Two Infinity Stones were reaching for each other across the dark, and no vault, no lock, no army on Earth could keep them apart. The cube tore open a doorway in the heart of the facility, and Loki of Asgard stepped through it. He came with a scepter in his hand, an army waiting behind the stars, and a smile on his face. The invasion of Earth had begun. The doorway was no lucky accident. From the shadows, long before he stepped through it, Loki had reached into the mind of Dr. Erik Selvig, the very scientist S.H.I.E.L.D. trusted to study the cube, so that when the day came, the door would already be unlocked from the inside. Now, the whispering became ownership. One touch of the scepter, and Selvig belonged to him completely, and so did Clint Barton, the archer Fury had posted to watch over the cube. And Loki had chosen his moment with care. The Bifrost lay shattered, Odin had grown weak, and for the first time in 1,000 years, Midgard stood without its protector. The bargain itself had been struck in the dark where Loki's fall ended, at the feet of the Titan who had looked at a broken god and seen a perfect instrument. Thanos had already done it to Zenhuberi and 100 worlds like it, half of every population erased, and he called that mercy. But worlds fall one at a time, and his true mission was bigger than any army could deliver. With the Infinity Stones, the work of a lifetime could be done in a single moment, and Earth was holding one of them. So a bargain was struck that gave each of them what they hungered for. Loki would receive an army, and with it, the chance to take Midgard for his own. A whole world to rule, a throne at last for the son no home had ever claimed. In return, Thanos would have the Tesseract, the Space Stone, the key that could open the entire universe to him. What Loki never suspected was that the scepter in his own hand carried a second stone. Thanos had sent one Infinity Stone to hunt another, and the true cost of that gamble would not be measured for years. Earth had no answer for this. No army, no missile, no defense ever designed for a war against the stars. Fury still carried the pager Carol Danvers had left him, made for exactly this kind of day. But she was light years away, fighting an empire, and the idea he had carried since she left was born from that very problem. Earth could not depend on a hero who lived beyond the sky. It needed its own. So Fury reached for the file that had waited 17 years for the world to need it. A list of names that were never supposed to share a room, and activated the Avengers Initiative. On Asgard, Odin learned what his adopted son had become. With the Bifrost in ruins, there was no road to Earth, so the old king paid for one himself, summoning dark energy, a power so dangerous that Asgard's own records barely speak of it, and hurled Thor across the void to bring his brother home. The spell worked, and the god of thunder came down over Midgard like a storm given a body. But power like that always asks a price from the one who calls on it. Odin was ancient, worn thin by his endless years and by the deep sleep his body had only just come out of. And some say the Allfather never got back what that spell took from him. The heroes Fury gathered were brilliant, powerful, and entirely unable to stand one another. A soldier out of his time, a billionaire who answered to no one, a scientist who trusted himself least of all, a spy with red in her ledger, and a god who considered them all beneath him. Divided, they were nothing, and Loki knew it. He had built his whole plan on it. He let himself be captured, and from a cell inside S.H.I.E.L.D's flying fortress, he picked at every crack in the team, while Barton's strike force tore the fortress open from the outside. It worked. The team broke apart, and Loki walked free, pausing at the cage that held his brother to send Thor falling from the sky. Agent Phil Coulson, the man who had believed in heroes before S.H.I.E.L.D. even had a name for them, stepped alone into his path to protect Thor, and fell to the scepter for it. But that one cruelty cost Loki everything his plan had won him. Coulson's loss did what no order from Fury ever could. It gave a collection of egos a reason to become a team. Loki's door into the sky still needed a machine to hold it open, and Selvig, still a prisoner inside his own mind, had built it for him. The device was placed at the top of Stark Tower, the gleaming monument Tony had just raised over Manhattan, drinking power from the tower's own arc reactor. The would-be King of Earth had chosen to begin his conquest from the roof of the man he most wanted to humble, and that vanity told the Avengers exactly where to find him. They converged on New York just as the portal split the sky above Stark Tower, and through it poured the Chitauri, the army Thanos had promised, wave after wave descending on the city. Captain America commanded the streets, Iron Man owned the sky, Black Widow and Hawkeye held the ground, Thor brought the lightning, and Bruce Banner, who had promised himself 2 years earlier that he was done running, chose the giant in front of the entire world. The Hulk tore through the invaders, and against a force from beyond the stars, the Avengers held the line while the whole world watched them do it. 74 civilians lost their lives that day, and behind that number stood real families. One of them was the family of Kate Bishop, a young girl whose father was taken when their penthouse was torn apart in the attack. Through the smoke and the chaos, Kate saw something she would never forget. A man standing against alien invaders armed with nothing but a bow and arrow. Hawkeye became her idol in that moment, and that image would quietly shape the rest of her life. The men in power, watching from their screens, decided the battle was already lost. The World Security Council fired a single missile at Manhattan, one built to erase the entire city, trading millions of lives for the end of the invasion. Iron Man caught the weapon on his back, carried it up through the portal, and let it go into the heart of the Chitauri fleet. The explosion ended the armada at its source, and Tony Stark fell back to Earth as the sky sealed shut behind him. The man who had once sold the world its most terrible weapons had thrown himself onto one to save a city, and he survived the fall. Thor returned to Asgard carrying both prizes of the war, his brother in chains and the Tesseract in hand. The Space Stone's power would rebuild the shattered Bifrost and restore Asgard's bridge to the 9 realms. As for Loki, he was sentenced to the dungeons for the rest of his days. But anyone who truly knew the god of mischief understood that no cell holds his ambition for long. The deepest secret of the aftermath was kept even from the Avengers themselves. Phil Coulson did not stay gone. Fury finally used Project T.A.H.I.T.I to bring him back, the same program Coulson himself had once run, and had begged Fury to shut down after watching what the Kree fluid did to its test subjects. The procedure carved out his memories and replaced them with a gentle lie about a recovery in Tahiti, and he woke believing his heart had stopped for only a few seconds. To the world, and to the heroes his loss had forged, Agent Coulson was gone. The team scattered, but the bonds remained. Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, two minds that had recognized each other instantly, began building together, pushing science past every limit it had. Steve Rogers, Clint Barton, and Natasha Romanoff returned to the ranks of S.H.I.E.L.D., lending their strength to an organization they still believed they could trust. The heroes had gone back to their lives, but the city they saved was left on its knees. The portal had closed, and what fell out of it stayed. By the summer of 2012, New York was still littered with the bones of an alien army, with crashed Leviathans, fallen Chitauri, and weapons humming with power no one on Earth understood. The battle had given the world its heroes. The cleanup would quietly make some of its monsters. Salvage like that was worth a fortune, and Adrian Toomes got there first. A salvage contractor from Queens, an ordinary working man, he bet everything he had on the job of clearing the wreckage. With new trucks, a bigger crew, and his family's future signed against a single city contract. The contract did not survive the summer. Tony Stark and the federal government created the Department of Damage Control to pull alien technology off the streets and lock it away. And with one signature, every private salvage crew in the city was pushed out of the job they had already paid for. Toomes was left with the debts, the trucks, and one thing nobody thought to ask about, a truckload of Chitauri technology his crew had already hauled in. So the working man made a quiet decision. If the people on top would not let him feed his family honestly, he would feed it from what they left behind. His crew began turning alien salvage into weapons and selling them in the dark, and the man paying their wages would one day hunt from the sky under a name made for a scavenger, the Vulture. But that hunt belongs to a later part. While Toomes was making a name for himself in the dark, not far from Queens, another man was burying his in plain sight. The battle had left Hell's Kitchen broken, and the money that arrived to rebuild it traced back to Wilson Fisk, a businessman the public barely knew and a crime lord the underworld feared. Where most people saw ruins, Fisk saw an empty board. He moved his money through a construction company called Union Allied, where every contract was a profit and every profit a wash for dirtier money underneath. And he did not build alone. His partners came from the deepest corners of the criminal world, among them Madame Gao, one of the 5 exiles who had founded the Hand 2,000 years ago. The hands rebuilding Hell's Kitchen were the same hands picking its pockets. And crime has a sound. Whispered deals, doors locking, money changing the wrong hands. The whole city had learned not to hear it. But in that same neighborhood lived a man who had been blinded there as a boy, and his ears missed nothing. Night after night, while Fisk bought Hell's Kitchen piece by piece, that man lay awake in the dark and heard every piece being taken. He had no mask yet, and no name the city feared. He was just listening. Hell's Kitchen was not the only place where secrets were waiting in the dark. One universe over, on Earth 120703, a secret had been waiting for years, locked inside a briefcase that belonged to a father who vanished. The boy who would open it was named Peter Parker, because the multiverse keeps writing that name, and it never writes it gently. This Peter had grown up with a hole where his parents should have been. They had walked out one night when he was a child and never come back, leaving him with his Uncle Ben and Aunt May and a question nobody would answer. In 2012, that briefcase finally surfaced in the house where Peter had grown up, and inside it lay the trail of secret genetic research Richard Parker had been running for Oscorp. It was a name that turned up across realities, the empire the Osborns built in another world. Here it stood in a different universe, hiding a different family's secrets. Peter followed that trail into Oscorp's labs, and one of his father's creations followed him back out. A genetically modified spider bit him, and the powers that woke in him would make him this universe's Spider-Man. But powers alone don't make a hero. What made him one was the same thing that made the Raimi Peter one, a world away. The question about his parents had its hooks in him now, pulling him out into the city night after night chasing answers, pulling him away from the only home he had left. One of those nights, he let a thief run past him, a small thing, not his problem, not his fight, and that same thief took Uncle Ben's life in the street hours later. Ben had gone out into that same night to find him, and never came home. The boy who couldn't stop digging into the family he lost had just lost the family he still had. It was the same wound, the same mistake, the same lesson arriving in a different universe. The gift was never the point. What you do with it is. The trail also led him to Dr. Curt Connors, his father's old research partner, a one-armed scientist still chasing the dream the two men had shared, using reptile DNA to regrow what the human body could not. For years, the work had been stuck on a single missing piece, a decay rate algorithm that had vanished when Richard Parker did, and the walls were closing in. Connors had a boss, an Oscorp man named Rajit Ratha, and the company's dying owner needed a cure fast. Ratha was leaning on him harder every day, demanding a breakthrough he couldn't deliver, and a scientist who couldn't deliver was a scientist about to lose everything. What Peter didn't know was that he was about to walk in at the exact moment Connors needed him most. He arrived carrying Richard Parker's old notebook, the missing half of the puzzle, and did what came naturally to him. He saw a problem he could solve, and he solved it, stepping up to the board and filling in the last of the equation without a second thought for where it might lead. He thought he was just being clever, helping his dad's old friend. He had no idea he was building a monster. The formula worked. A test mouse grew back a missing limb, and the impossible became real. But the miracle came with a fuse attached. Ratha saw the success and demanded human trials at once on patients who had never agreed to any of it. Connors refused to rush it, and Oscorp threw him out for it. Cornered, out of time, and desperate to prove the work before they buried it, he made the choice that broke him. He rolled up his own sleeve and injected the unfinished formula into himself. The arm grew back, whole and strong, and for a few hours he had everything he wanted. Then the formula kept working. The reptile DNA was not content to rebuild his arm. It reached into his brain and started replacing the man, swapping a doctor's conscience for a predator's instincts, drowning out everything Connors believed about right and wrong under something older and colder. A reptile does not feel guilt. It does not protect the weak. It sees only strength and prey. And as that mind took him over, the scientist who had spent his life trying to heal one weakness began to see weakness as the enemy itself. Sickness, frailty, mortality. The whole fragile human condition. He decided his new form was not a curse, but the answer. The next step humanity was too afraid to take. Connors became the lizard, and his cure for one missing arm twisted into a cure for being human at all. A mutagenic cloud he would spread across New York to remake every soul in the city into something like himself, whether they wanted saving or not. Beating him took more than Spider-Man alone. By now, Peter had let one person all the way into his life. Every Peter has that person, the one the mask is supposed to protect. In the Raimi world, it was the girl next door, Mary Jane. Here, it was a sharp, fearless girl named Gwen Stacy, who worked at Oscorp and had already figured out the boy behind the mask. Her father was Captain George Stacy of the NYPD, a man who had spent the whole story certain Spider-Man was a menace to his city, a masked criminal who needed catching. Then the manhunt caught up with the vigilante. The police cornered Spider-Man and pulled off his mask. And the man staring back at the captain was the boy his own daughter was in love with. Everything changed for Stacy in that moment, though there was no time to reckon with it, because the lizard was about to make his move. Oscorp had a machine built to spread chemicals across a wide area, and the lizard took it for himself. He carried it to the top of Oscorp Tower and loaded it with his mutagen, a device now set to blast his serum across the whole of Manhattan and remake the city in one stroke. The machine was going to fire no matter what. The only way to stop it was to change what it fired, and that fell to Gwen. Working inside Oscorp, she built an antidote that could reverse the mutation, brewed it into a cartridge that would fit the lizard's own machine, and sent it up the tower in the hands of the one person she trusted to reach Peter in time, her own father. Captain Stacy reached the top and put himself in the lizard's path, fighting to buy Peter the time he needed, holding off a creature that healed faster than any wound he could land, while Peter climbed for the machine. He stood there and gave everything for a boy he now knew by name, protecting his daughter's whole world without her ever knowing he was doing it. Peter made the swap, and the weapon built to turn the city into monsters blanketed it in the cure instead. He saved everyone, but he could not save the man falling beside him. Stacy spent his final breath not on anger, but on a warning. This life makes enemies, and the people closest to you are the ones who pay. Leave Gwen out of it. Promise me. Peter promised. It was a promise he would find almost impossible to keep. That same year, back on Earth 616, another man was learning what his choices cost the people around him, though he was a great deal slower to admit it. Tony Stark had flown a weapon through a hole in the sky over New York and barely come back, and the man who landed was not the same one who took off. He could not sleep. He could not stop. When the world had moved on from the invasion, Tony could not. He had seen what waited on the other side of that portal, a whole army from beyond the stars, and he knew in his bones it was only the first wave. So he built, suit after suit, dozens of them, a private army of armor, trying to be ready for a war he was certain was coming, because the alternative was lying awake with nothing between his family and the sky. Into that fragile moment stepped a villain tailor-made for the age. A figure calling himself the Mandarin had begun seizing the world's airwaves, broadcasting threats between a string of attacks no one could explain or prevent, striking with no pattern and no face. He looked like the nightmare a frightened world had been waiting for. When one of those attacks put Tony's friend Happy Hogan in a hospital bed, Tony did the most Tony thing imaginable. He went on camera, gave the Mandarin his home address, and dared him to come. The answer came by air. Attack helicopters tore Tony's Malibu home off its cliff and dropped it into the sea, taking his old suits down with it. He came out of the wreckage with a single prototype, the Mark 42, damaged and nearly out of power. It carried him to the one place his investigation had already pointed, a small town in Tennessee where one of the strange attacks had happened, the lead he had been chasing before his house came down. The suit gave out the moment it got him there, stranding him in the snow of Rose Hill. No working suit, no way to reach Jarvis through it, the world unsure whether he had even survived. For the first time in years, the richest man in the room had nothing to fall back on but the mechanic he used to be. Stripped of the armor he thought he could not live without, Tony had to become the thing underneath it. Working out of a garage like the man he used to be, he pulled the Mandarin's campaign apart, thread by thread, and what he found at the center of it was a joke. The Mandarin was not real. He was a stage, a part played by a washed-up, perpetually drunk actor named Trevor Slattery, a frightened man reciting lines for a paycheck, with no idea the attacks blamed on his fearsome speeches were real. The face the whole world feared was a hired performance, and the man behind the curtain was someone Tony had met before and never once thought about again. Years earlier, on New Year's Eve in 1999, a brilliant scientist named Aldrich Killian had approached a younger, crueler Tony Stark with real admiration and a genuine offer to build something together. Back then, Killian was a nobody, awkward and disabled, easy to dismiss, and Tony, riding high and careless with people, dismissed him in the cruelest way he could. He told Killian to wait for him on a rooftop, promised to meet him there, and simply never came, leaving the man standing alone in the cold while the new century began without him. That small cruelty, long forgotten by Tony, festered in Killian for 13 years. He rebuilt himself from the ground up, turned his own mind into a fortune, and founded a think tank called AIM that bankrolled the cutting edge of fringe science. At the center of his work was Extremis, a treatment that rewrote the human body to heal any wound, regrow lost limbs, and burn with incredible heat and strength. But it was unstable. Subjects who could not hold the power glowed white-hot and lost control, and the ones who came apart were dismissed by the world as one more Mandarin attack. The whole campaign was a magic trick, a way to hide his failed experiments behind a monster of his own invention, while he maneuvered toward the real prize, control over both the men who feared the Mandarin and the leaders who fought him. Killian's real goal was bigger than revenge on Tony. He wanted to own both sides of the world's fear at once. He had spent the whole campaign making himself the secret hand behind the Mandarin, the monster the West was terrified of, and now he moved to seize the other end of it, the leaders sworn to fight that monster. His men captured the President of the United States, and the plan was to end him live on camera and slip his own puppet, a bought and paid-for vice president, into the most powerful seat on Earth. With the fear he controlled and the government he controlled, Killian would own the entire war on terror, the threat and the answer to it, a buyer and a seller in one hand. He had only one problem left to solve. Extremis still burned out the people he put it in, and a product that destroyed its own customers was worth nothing. So he reached for the one man who could fix it, and the surest way to make Tony Stark work for him. He took Pepper Potts and put Extremis in her veins, betting that to save her, Tony would hand him a stable formula. It was a cruel piece of leverage, and it was the mistake that undid him. The battle that followed cost Tony nearly everything, and he met it at last not as one man in a suit, but with the whole army of armor he had built in his sleepless nights, the Iron Legion flying in to stand for him. In the end, it was not Tony who finished Killian. It was Pepper, the Extremis now burning in her veins, who caught the man who had taken everything from them and ended his fire for good. And the moment the fight was won, standing in the wreckage with the woman he had nearly lost, Tony made his choice. He gave the order, and one by one, every suit he had built in his fear lit up the night sky and destroyed itself. The whole anxious army gone in a gesture meant for Pepper. The armor had never been the thing that made him Iron Man, and the moment he stopped needing it to feel safe was the moment he finally understood that. In the quieter days that followed, he set the rest right. He had the shrapnel cut from his chest at last, the final shard of the cave that made him, free of it after all these years. And he turned the same genius everyone had been trying to steal toward the one use that mattered, working until he could pull the unstable Extremis safely out of Pepper and make her whole again. The formula a dozen people had schemed and fought over became in the end nothing grander than the thing that saved the woman he loved. The lesson would not fully hold, because old fears have a way of coming back wearing new names. But for now, Tony Stark had put his demons down. While Earth wrestled with its own monsters, the trouble brewing above it was older and far larger. Across the 9 realms, the heavens were coming apart. Ever since Thor shattered the Bifrost to save Jotunheim, the bridge that let Asgard police the 9 realms was gone, and without it, order was unraveling across the cosmos. Worse, word had spread that Odin was no longer the king he had been, that the All-Father could no longer hold the heavens together. Thor spent these years putting out fires across the realms, fighting to keep a peace that was slipping through Asgard's fingers one world at a time. A far older danger was about to wake up because of a door nobody meant to open. Every 5,000 years, the 9 realms drift into perfect alignment, an event the Asgardians call the Convergence. And when they line up, the walls between worlds go thin, and portals tear open. The last time it happened, back in the age of Bor, Odin's father, the universe nearly ended. The Dark Elves of Malekith had tried to use a weapon called the Ether to drown all of creation back into the darkness that came before light. Bor stopped them, and to keep the Ether from ever being used again, he hid it where no one would think to look. The surviving Dark Elves went into a sleep as long as the cycle itself, waiting for the realms to align again. The cycle came due again, and the realms began to align. On Earth, Jane Foster, the astrophysicist Thor had fallen for, was investigating a strange anomaly in London, the kind of impossible reading that had led her to Thor in the first place. She had no idea she had stumbled onto one of the gaps the Convergence was tearing open between worlds. Chasing it, she wandered through a door that should not have existed, and found the thing Bor had buried an age ago. What poured into her was the Ether, the ancient weapon the Dark Elves had once used to try to unmake creation. But the Ether was more than a Dark Elf relic. At its core, it was one of the 6 Infinity Stones, the same 6 this whole story has been tracking since the beginning. This was the Reality Stone, the one with the power to bend the fabric of existence itself, and the Dark Elves had turned it into a weapon, a flowing red force instead of a solid crystal, capable of drowning all of creation back into darkness. It bonded itself to Jane the instant it touched her, and the moment it woke, it sent a signal across the cosmos to the ones who had been waiting for it. Deep in their long sleep, the Dark Elves opened their eyes. Their weapon was buried inside a human woman who had no idea she was now carrying the most dangerous object in the 9 realms, and to get it back, Malekith would have to come for her. The first sign that something was wrong came from Asgard's own watchman. Heimdall, the gatekeeper who could see every soul across the 9 realms, suddenly could not find Jane at all, as if she had slipped out of the universe itself. That was enough to send Thor down to Earth, though in truth he had been longing for any reason to return to the woman he had left behind. When he found her, he understood what had blinded Heimdall. Jane was glowing with a power that lashed out at anyone who came near her, a force no one on Earth could explain or contain. Recognizing it as something far beyond this world, Thor brought her back to Asgard for protection, carrying the ether straight into the Golden City without knowing what he held. Malekith now had exactly what he needed, a universe sliding into alignment and his stone waiting for him inside the walls of Asgard itself. What followed cost Asgard more than any war had in an age. The Dark Elves struck the Golden City itself, and in the attack, Thor lost his mother. Frigga, the queen, the one soul in all of Asgard who had never stopped loving Loki even after everything he had done, stood between the Dark Elves and Jane and gave her life doing it. Her loss broke something open in both of her sons, the true one and the stolen one, and it would take both of them to answer for it. Because Thor could not win this one alone, and he knew it. Odin, blind with grief, wanted to keep Jane locked in Asgard as bait and meet Malekith head-on, a plan that would get the whole city burned. Thor refused to spend his home that way, so he turned to the one being clever enough to outwit Malekith, the brother sitting in a cell beneath the palace, the prince who had let go of the bridge and fallen into the dark. He freed Loki, committing treason against his own father to do it, and for the mother they shared, the 2 brothers struck a fragile alliance. Loki knew of secret ways out of Asgard, hidden paths even Heimdall could not watch. The plan was a gamble built on a hard truth. As long as the ether hid inside Jane, it could not be touched. So Thor would let Malekith take it. They smuggled Jane to Svartalheim, the ruined world of the Dark Elves, and dangled her as bait, betting that the moment Malekith drew the ether out of her body to claim it, it would hang exposed in the open air for one breath, long enough for Thor to destroy it and end the threat forever. The bait worked. Malekith came, pulled the ether free of Jane, and Thor struck it with everything he had, enough lightning to bring down a monster, and it failed. You cannot destroy an Infinity Stone with a hammer, not even Thor's. The ether reformed, flowed into Malekith, and the Dark Elf rose more powerful than ever, a being now carrying the power to bend reality itself. The plan had not just failed, it had handed Malekith exactly what he wanted. In the ruin that followed, as Dark Elves swarmed the brothers, Loki took a blow meant for Thor and fell. He gave his life saving the brother he had spent years trying to destroy, and Thor held him as the light went out of him, and grieved him as truly gone. Or believed he did. Malekith fled to the one place the Convergence would soon turn into a weapon against all creation, Earth. Greenwich, in London, sat at the exact center of the alignment, the one spot where all 9 realms would briefly touch. And from there, Malekith could pour the ether through every world at once and drown the universe in darkness, finishing what his kind had started 5,000 years before. Thor chased him there, the 2 of them fighting across portals that kept dropping them into different worlds mid-swing. In the end, it was Jane and her scientists turning their own portal devices on Malekith, who scattered him across the realms and let Thor finish him. The universe held. The darkness stayed where it belonged. The mess, though, did not clean itself up. After the battle tore through Greenwich, it fell to a quieter team to sweep the wreckage for anything Asgardian left behind. The agents of Phil Coulson, the man the Avengers still believed was gone. This was the kind of work that never made the headlines, scrubbing a battlefield of alien tech before it fell into the wrong hands. But pieces always slipped through. A Norse hate group had already dug up one such relic, an ancient Asgardian weapon that fed on a person's buried rage, and Coulson's team had to chase it down before it tore through innocent people. It was a reminder that every time gods waged war on Earth, ordinary people were left holding the dangerous things they dropped. But a loose Infinity Stone is its own kind of danger, and the Tesseract, the Space Stone, was already locked in Asgard's vaults. 2 of the 6 under one roof was a risk Asgard would not take, not after watching what a single stone had done to New York. So they carried the ether far from home, out to a strange outpost at the edge of everything called Nowhere, and placed it in the hands of a being who collected the rarest and most powerful things in the cosmos. They called him the Collector. Handing him a stone that could unmake the universe seems like madness, until you understand the logic. Keep the pieces scattered, one here and one there, and no one can ever gather all 6 into a single fist. With the realms quieting and the war won, Odin offered Thor the throne at last, and Thor, who had spent his whole life being shaped into a king, turned it down. He had found something on Earth worth more to him than a crown, and he went back to Jane rather than rule. He left Asgard in his father's hands, certain his home was safe. It was not. The Odin who sat on that throne, who smiled and let his son walk away, was not Odin at all. Somewhere in the realms, the real Allfather had been cast out, stranded on Earth and fading in a quiet retirement home, his memories slipping, an old man no one would ever recognize as a king. And in his place on the golden throne of Asgard sat the son everyone believed had died for his brother. Loki had not given his life on that battlefield. He had faked his fall, slipped back home wearing his father's face, and taken the one thing he had always been told he could never have. The discarded child finally had his throne, and not a soul in Asgard knew the realm was being ruled by a lie. As far as the world knew, Phil Coulson was gone. The Avengers mourned him. His loss was the thing that turned them into a team, and outside Fury's closest circle, everyone believed the loyal agent who took Loki's scepter had not survived. So when Coulson walked back into a S.H.I.E.L.D. facility in September 2013, alive and well, the few who knew the truth treated it as a miracle. Coulson believed a gentler version of it himself, that he had been gone only a matter of seconds before they brought him back, and a long, quiet recovery in Tahiti had done the rest. He did not yet know what had really been done to him, or what it would cost. Given a fresh start and his pick of the roster, Coulson built a small team for the cases too strange for anyone else. There was Melinda May, a pilot and field agent so formidable the rumors about her had their own rumors. A woman who had pulled herself off the front line after a mission left a wound she never talked about. There was Grant Ward, a by-the-book specialist who worked alone and liked it that way. There were Leo Fitz and Gemma Simmons, 2 brilliant young scientists so inseparable the team just called them Fitz-Simmons. One of them an engineer, the other a biochemist, both of them barely out of the academy. And there was the one who did not belong, a hacker who went by Sky, pulled in from an activist network that had been leaking S.H.I.E.L.D. secrets to the public. She trusted no government, least of all this one. She had her own reason for getting close to S.H.I.E.L.D., a search for the parents she never knew, and a trail that led somewhere inside their files. Their first case put them on the trail of something that should not have existed. A man with no history of power had pulled a woman out of a burning building with his bare hands, lifting rubble no person should have been able to lift, only to begin coming apart soon after. The team pulled the thread and found a secret program running underneath, something called Centipede. And it was trying to do the one thing that had haunted this whole timeline since the war. It was trying to build super soldiers. Whoever ran Centipede had been greedy. They had taken every recipe for power the modern world had produced and forced them into a single serum. The super soldier formula that made Captain America, the gamma science that made the Hulk and his abomination, alien technology scavenged from the wreckage of New York, and one ingredient more volatile than all the rest, Extremis. The same unstable fire that had burned through Tony Stark's life only months before. The formula that made its subjects glow from the inside and lose control when their bodies could not hold it. Someone had picked Extremis out of the ashes of that affair and folded it into something even more dangerous. Centipede pumped all of it through an alien metal device clamped to the arm, and it gave their test subjects real strength, real power. It also turned them into something ready to go off at any moment. Push a Centipede subject too far, let the Extremis spike, and the man simply burst apart, taking everything around him with it. The program had cracked the door to super soldiers open, but every soldier it made was a countdown. That was the war Coulson's team stepped into, chasing an enemy that could turn a rescued father into a weapon that might go off at any second. But the deeper danger was not the serum, and it was not the shadowy figure giving Centipede its orders from somewhere none of them could see. The deeper danger was that the people hunting this threat still believed S.H.I.E.L.D. was clean. They thought they were the good guys, working for an organization worth trusting. Every one of them was about to learn how wrong that was.